watching Shalom TV, celebrating Jewish culture. Funding for Shalom TV has been provided by the following. And by viewers like you.
Welcome to another in our series, Jewish 101, a program for anyone interested in all things Jewish, beginning with an adult understanding of the Jewish tradition. I'm Mark Golub, and if you're joining us for the first time, we're talking about Maimonides, the Rambam, the greatest Jewish legal authority and the greatest Jewish philosopher in Jewish history. As the saying goes, from Moses to Moses, there was no one like Moses, meaning that there was no Jewish personality of greater stature or mind, Jewish soul. From the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, the Moses of the Torah, to Reb Moshe ben Maimon, who lived in the 12th century in Egypt, was the court physician to the Sultan, and became the preeminent leader of world Jewry based on his vast knowledge of Talmudic law and his many, many authoritative writings, including his code of Jewish law called the Mishnah Torah, which we looked at last time. And why do I turn to Maimonides at this point in our study together? Because I want to look at the other most important book Maimonides wrote, which may answer some of the questions many of you who watch Jewish 101 have been asking me recently. Namely, when I explain that the Torah is not to be read literally, or when I explain that to the rabbis God never interferes supernaturally in the world, that the Jewish notion is that God never suspends the laws of nature, that nature must always follow its natural course. How traditional is this teaching? Is it authentic Judaism? Would Orthodox rabbis agree with this teaching? Or am I somehow presenting some modern, reform, revisionist expression of Judaism? So, for example, I recently received a wonderful email from a viewer in New York named Robert, who wrote me this. When I started watching Jewish 101, Rabbi Golub's lectures struck me more than any religious teaching I'd ever before experienced. They did not make me a believer, but they gave me more insight into the Jewish tradition than anything I had heard or read before. The first two programs I saw, Noah and the Red Sea, made me want to share these programs with my oldest and dearest friend. He has rediscovered conservative Judaism. However, when I expressed to him two of Rabbi Golub's points, that the Torah is not to be read literally, and that God does not change natural law to intervene in the world, he asked me whether Rabbi Golub was a reform rabbi, espousing reform revisionist Judaism. And I continue to find it so fascinating how so many Jews have been brought up on Bubamaises about what the Jewish tradition teaches, and have been exposed only to a rather childlike, simplistic, and yes, literal and supernatural orientation to Judaism, which many Jews now reject because they can't relate to such a worldview. And then when Jews hear the kinds of extraordinary insights of the rabbis that really is authentic traditional Judaism, the reaction is almost one of ambivalence. On the one hand, how wonderful this is. How wonderful this Jewish tradition is of mine. And at the very same moment, but it's almost too good to be true. It can't be real Judaism. It's too good. It sounds too good. It makes too much sense. It can't be Orthodox Judaism. And I repeat to you again, I understand that there are many Jews who do read the Torah literally and who do believe in a God who does intervene in some supernatural way in human history, in our lives. And such Jews are absolutely entitled to their understanding of Judaism. My goal on Jewish 101, however, is to speak to any of you who are looking for an understanding of Torah and Judaism which you can embrace, which is exciting to you, which resonates throughout your entire being as a sense of Torah that is in harmony with the rest of what you understand the world to be. And I'm suggesting here on Jewish 101 that authentic, traditional Judaism encompasses an approach to life that is thrilling in its understanding of human nature, in its obsessive insistence that people treat other people in a gentle, kind, responsible, loving way, that the Jewish tradition is all about people. And that while the Jewish tradition trusts in God, a much better use of language than the phrase believes in God, Jews trust in God, trust that there is a God, the ground and source of all life and energy that pulsates through everything in this universe, the validation that every act of kindness and goodness we do is in harmony with the real God of this universe. And that to do less than treat other people with dignity and compassion is not only an injury inflicted on another human being, but in some way it's a violation of our relationship with the divine, with God. But that to be human, according to the rabbis, according to our Jewish tradition, also allows for living with a degree of uncertainty about the reality of this God. To live with uncertainty about the reality of God, which is why the Jewish tradition is wonderfully tolerant of the agnostic. Why the Jewish tradition is not based on a public creed or dogma that a Jew must subscribe to or be ruled out of the synagogue or Jewish community. One's beliefs are one's own business. What Jews have always cared about in terms of other people is how human beings behave, how we treat other people, and how Jews participate in Jewish life, in Jewish community, in the upbuilding and sustaining of Jewish life and Jewish community, so that the values of Torah, these wondrous, unique insights into human nature, what it means to be a lovely, good person, that these values are sustained and passed on from generation to generation. A good Jew is also involved in Jewish life. And in this context, I want to show you the way the greatest Jewish philosopher in Jewish history and the most revered authority in the Orthodox Jewish world, how the Rambam, Maimonides, tries to communicate these very ideas in his monumental work, Moreh Nevuchim, which literally means teacher of the confused, and which is known in English as the Guide of the Perplexed. And when you read any of the guide, you are immediately struck with the realization that Maimonides could have been writing today for Jews of the 21st century. The concerns Maimonides is addressing in this book are the concerns many Jews have today about reconciling a commitment to Jewish tradition and Torah with an understanding of everything else we know about nature and science and philosophy and human nature. And I ask you this first: whom did Maimonides write his guide for? It's a very important question. For whom did Maimonides write his guide of the perplexed, the Moreh Nevuchim? And the question is important because it goes to the issue of what is authentic Judaism, and where and how faith and belief fit into the Jewish tradition as a whole. And I've argued repeatedly that in the Jewish tradition, behavior is primary, belief is secondary. How Jews behave is what matters to the rabbis, which is why Judaism is not really a religion. It's not based on belief or faith. It's a way of life. It's a way of living day to day. So again, for whom did Maimonides write his guide of the perplexed? And the answer is, Maimonides wrote the guide to the perplexed for committed, observant Jews. The guide is written for committed Jews, observant Jews. And one might think that the perplexed Jew, in Maimonides' mind, was the Jew who was not yet committed or observant, very much like many perplexed Jews today. One might think that from Maimonides' perspective, a committed, observant Jew would not be perplexed. But oh no, to the contrary. Maimonides understood that Jews could be committed and fully observant and still live in a state of what? Perplexedness. With doubts about how one should read the text, the Torah. With confusions. With questions. And Jews always ask questions. No question is out of bounds. And the answer many of us received as children to our questions, namely, don't ask, was never the authentic rabbinic Jewish response. Jews have always asked, why? How? Questions drive Jewish life, and they drive the Talmudic discussion. And for Maimonides, being a committed and observant Jew did not mean that one checked his brains at the door, was oblivious to the contradictions that make life real, or stopped using reason. No, Maimonides insisted that we, Jews, use mind and reason and rationality as part of our understanding of the world and of Torah. So, this is important to understand. Maimonides was not writing a book to convince Jews to become committed and observant. Maimonides assumed his reader already was a committed and observant Jew who had problems with a literal reading of the Torah, with miracles in the Torah, with an anthropomorphic view of God in the Torah. In the 12th century, 900 years ago, Maimonides is trying to help Jews understand how to read the Torah and to understand that God is not an invisible person. And here we are today, and Jews are still perplexed over the same issues. And that's what's evoked some of the questions that I've received in the emails I've received. Is it really Jewish to say that the Torah is not read literally, but read as poetry? And what about the reality of God? So let's take a look at actual passages from Maimonides' Guide of the Perplexed to see how this greatest of all Jewish philosophers and thinkers tried to help us, trying to help Jews understand the Jewish tradition. How Maimonides is helping us understand our Judaism. And let's begin by taking a look at Maimonides' introduction to part 1 of Moreh Nevuchim, the Guide of the Perplexed. Maimonides writes, "It is not the purpose of this treatise, this text, to make its totality understandable to the vulgar of the beginners in speculation, nor to teach those who have not engaged in any study other than the science of the law. I mean, the legalistic study of the law." And by law, Maimonides refers to Torah. In other words, Maimonides says from the very beginning, he is not writing this book for Jewish novices. If a Jew has only studied Jewish law and Torah and has never studied either general or Jewish philosophy, science, the world, this book is not for them. This book is for those Jews who have had exposure to the larger world of knowledge and learning and a larger sense of Jewish learning. Then Maimonides writes, "But the purpose of this treatise is the science of the law," again, law here means Torah, "in its true sense. Or rather, its purpose is to give indications to a religious man for whom the validity of our law has become established in his soul." So Maimonides is saying that the goal of the Guide of the Perplexed is to teach the truth behind Torah, and is meant for the Jew for whom the Torah is already embedded in his soul, but still has problems with the Torah. Again, Maimonides is writing for the committed, observant, knowledgeable Jew who has trouble with the Torah. For Maimonides realizes that this very committed Jew, knowledgeable Jew, may also find himself torn between what he's learned in general and what he's been taught by some Jewish authority about Judaism. And here is how Maimonides expresses this dilemma such a Jew may face. "The human intellect, having drawn him on and led him to dwell within its province," referring to a person who has learned about nature and science and the humanities outside of strict Jewish learning, "he must have felt distressed by the externals of the law, by the way the Torah expresses itself, as he continued to understand them by himself, or was made to understand them by others." Maimonides writes, such a Jew might feel distressed, what a wonderful word, upset by some of the things he reads in the Torah, as he reads them on his own, or as he was taught by others, or to use Maimonides' more direct language, made to understand them by others. And of course, Maimonides is referring to those kinds of rabbis and teachers of Judaism who force a literal understanding of Judaism on their students. For Maimonides, not some contemporary Reform rabbi, for Maimonides, the problem for educated, committed Jews is that the Torah text has many passages which are not in harmony with everything else one knows about the world, including language that presents God as if God were a person in anthropomorphic language. So that for many bright, educated Jews, there's an obvious contradiction between a literal reading of the Torah and everything else known about the world. And Maimonides says that this can lead to Jewish, again, distress. I love that image of Jewish distress from one's reading of certain passages in the Torah. Distress. So Maimonides continues. Hence, this person would remain in a state of perplexity and confusion as to whether he should follow his intellect and constantly consider that he has renounced the foundations of law, meaning of Torah, or should he hold fast to his understanding of these terms? In other words, should the committed observant Jew hold on to a literal understanding of Torah and not let himself be drawn on together with his intellect, rather turning his back on it, meaning turning his back on his intellect and general education, and moving away from it, the intellect, while at the same time perceiving that he had brought loss to himself and harm to his religion. He would be left with those imaginary beliefs to which he owes his fear and difficulty, and would not cease to suffer from heartache and great perplexity. So Maimonides argues that an educated Jew who is forced to accept a literal reading of the Torah when it doesn't feel right to that Jew would feel that he had injured the stature of Judaism by accepting a literal fundamentalist reading of Torah, which threatens to trivialize the Torah, rendering it irrelevant to many people. And that such a Jew, Maimonides argues, would be left with what Maimonides calls imaginary beliefs, which would continue to bring him heartache and great perplexity. Imaginary beliefs is how Maimonides describes a literal reading of the Torah. Maimonides then adds a second goal, a second reason for his writing, the Guide of the Perplexed. Here's what he writes. This treatise also has a second purpose, namely the explanation of very obscure parables. And Maimonides is going to show that some of the narratives of the Torah, what Maimonides calls parables, I've used the word poetry, that the Torah is narrative poetry. Maimonides uses the word parables to describe Torah texts. Hence, an ignorant or heedless individual might think that they, these parables, possess only an external sense, but no internal one, meaning a literal sense, but no deeper meaning. But if we explain these parables to him, or if we draw his attention to their being parables, he will take the right road and be delivered from perplexity. This is why I have called this treatise the Guide of the Perplexed. From Maimonides, one makes a mistake if one thinks that Torah passages are to be read literally, and that it's the literal reading that produces the true meaning of a Torah passage. No. For Maimonides, the Jew needs to understand that these passages are parables, and that their meaning comes from the messages derived from them, from inside them. In other words, according to Maimonides, the Torah is not to be read literally, but to be understood as parables. This is traditional Jewish thinking, not modern Reform revisionist Judaism. And then Maimonides continues with one of what is, from my perspective, his most brilliant of images, in which he compares moments of religious experience and insight, moments when we are somehow in touch with the divine in this universe, with God. Maimonides likens those moments of religious experience to the experience of living in flashes of lightning that come and go in an instant. Here's how Maimonides expresses this idea. I do not say that this treatise will remove all difficulties for those who understand it. But sometimes truth flashes out to us so that we think that it is day. We are like someone in a very dark night over whom lightning flashes time and time again. Among us there are those for whom the lightning flashes time and time again, so that they are always, as it were, in unceasing light. Thus, night appears to them as day. That is the degree of the great ones among the prophets. Don't miss the enormous insight of Maimonides' imagery here. I believe it reflects the truth in the way human beings experience the divine, God. For most of us, there are moments, just moments, when suddenly we have an insight, a sense of the divine. Maybe it's an experience with the awesome wonder of nature, or of music, or of art. And for an instant, there is incredible clarity about the oneness of all existence, the goodness that is the ground of all existence. And for that moment, that instant, we know something profound about the transcending reality of this universe. We sense what the Jewish tradition calls the Shekhinah, God's presence. We just sense God's presence in the beauty and wonder and glory and love of our world. We just know it. And it's nothing we can prove. We can't box it up and give it to someone as a present. It's something we've experienced personally as a moment of personal truth. And it's most wonderful when it occurs in the midst of a relationship with another human being, with someone we love. The great modern philosopher of the 20th century, Martin Buber, describes this experience as the I-thou experience. When one really understands the other person as a complete human being, as a thou. When one truly experiences and knows the other person in their totality, the essence of their being. Knows them not as an object, but as another soul, as a thou. And we all know what Buber's talking about because we've had this experience. And the way it was described to me by my own teacher, there are times when something is bothering us. And we look for someone we really trust, for a dear friend to tell this to. And we call someone we know and they say, yeah, please come on over, we'll talk. And when we get there, they're watching TV and we have to wait. And finally we say, look, I'd really like to talk to you. Sure, of course, go ahead. And we begin to unburden ourselves. We try to express the pain that we are experiencing in our heart, the confusion we may have, whatever the dilemma is. And everything we feel just comes out so perfectly. We can say it exactly like we want to say it. We're articulating it in such a perfect way. And then suddenly we notice that the other person is staring at a stain on our shirt, or is somehow looking at a pimple on our face. And we stop. And the person says, well, why did you stop? Because you weren't listening. What do you mean I wasn't listening? And then the person recites our last two sentences verbatim. No. You weren't listening to me. And we know what it is to be listened to because every now and then we've had the opposite experience where we don't even plan to talk. We're just with someone we trust or love, and somehow, again, without planning, we begin to talk. And as we hear what we're saying, it's not coming out right, it sounds garbled, it's so confusing. We just can't articulate it in an easy way. And then we look at the eyes of this other person. And they got it. They understood everything we were trying to say. And everything that we wanted to say. They understood that too. Because they listened to us. There was no part of them that wasn't with us. Entirely with us. And in that moment, we understand that they heard us. And they understand that we understand they heard us. And we understand that they understand that we understand that they heard us. There was no part of either of us outside watching, censoring, observing that moment. Our entire being was in that moment. And after that moment, the two of us are never the same. There's something more profound about our relationship from then till forever. Because two people have really had what Buber calls this I-thou experience, where they are really one with the other person. And whenever Buber writes the term I-thou, he writes it with a hyphen. And the hyphen in the I-thou relationship is what Buber also says is God. That in every I-thou relationship, each person senses there is more present there, more than just the I and more than just the thou. For out of the I-thou relationship, one comes away knowing that the divine was there too. Somehow God was there also. And the rabbis teach this notion in the same way in many midrash. Where is God found? Wherever 10 people form for a minyan, wherever 6 people gather to study, wherever 3 people share a meal together and recite Birkat Hamazon, the blessing over the meal, and wherever 2 people share moments of love. In a true I-thou relationship where one gives one's entire self and meets the other in their entirety of soul, there God is also found for just a moment, like a flash of lightning. In the Jewish tradition, one never gets a diploma to put on one's wall. You are now a believer forever, once and for all. No, that's not the Jewish way. The Jewish tradition understands that most human beings live in between flashes of lightning. When the flashes occur, there is a moment, just a moment of understanding, of seeing the landscape all the way to the horizon. I remember as a young child, whenever I read this part of Maimonides, I remember as a young child driving in the back of my grandfather's Chrysler. And we would drive through the roads of Ohio in the pitch dark of night. Not a road lamp anywhere. There were no street lamps then. There were no highway lamps. It was all just pitch dark. I remember I'd sit in the back seat and I would imagine as I looked out the back window, darkness. I'd imagine what was outside the car. I couldn't see anything, but I had my imagination of what the landscape looked like. And I remember once as we were driving along and there was a storm coming, there was a sudden flash of lightning. And it lit up the entire landscape as far as you could see. And to my shock, outside the window, there were cornfields on either side of the road, high, deep, forever stalks of corn, which for an instant were lit for me by this flash of lightning. And I've never imagined corn stalks were along the road. I was a kid, I was a child, driving in my grandfather's Chrysler. But in that flash of lightning, I saw reality, the truth of the cornfields as far as the eye could see into the horizon. And in an instant, the flash was gone, and it was darkness again. And I understand Maimonides' image. We travel through life, and there's often a spiritual darkness. And every now and then, we cannot make it happen. We can only be open to its happening. But every now and then there is a flash of something spiritual, of spiritual lightning, a moment when we truly sense the Shekhinah is at our right hand, and goodness and kindness and loveliness and love are validated to the depths and core of our being, so that we know that every time we do the right thing, every act of loving kindness, of compassion, of being there for another person, being a gentle, kind, good, responsible human being is not only socially practical. It's not only good social policy. It not only makes us feel good for the moment if we like doing good things for other people. It does not only encourage other people to be nice to us. When I was growing up, it was always, if you're nice to them, they'll be nice to you, which isn't even true. Very often you're nice to someone, they're not nice back. But we know in that moment, this moment of lightning that Maimonides talks about, that being a good person, doing good, is in harmony with the very essence of the universe, is in harmony with what the Jewish tradition understands God to be. And the Jewish tradition says to us the challenge of life is living between those flashes of lightning. How brilliant is Maimonides when he writes that the difference between the prophets and the rest of us is simply that the lightning happens more often for the prophets. Simply more often. Maimonides writes, I do not say that this treatise will remove all difficulties for those who understand it. People, even who understand, will still have difficulties. Doubt is not a sin in Judaism. I argue that agnosticism is an authentic Jewish condition. It's so difficult to be absolutely sure of anything, that there's a God in this universe. The only question is, how does one live one's life in the midst of one's agnosticism and lack of assuredness? The rabbis teach, this is their answer, live life as if you are sure there is a God. The Hebrew word is ke'ilu, as if. And the word ke'ilu may be the most important theological word in the Jewish tradition. Ke'ilu, as if. Live your life as if there is a God, even when you're not sure there is one. During all those moments between the flashes when one is not sure there ever was a real flash to begin with, maybe it was one's imagination, hallucination. One is not sure there'll ever be another one. The rabbis say, live your life ke'ilu, as if you are sure. It's okay to be an agnostic, to be unsure, to doubt. That's only a matter of belief. So long as ke'ilu, one acts, one behaves as if there's a God, and not a God who interferes or who rewards or punishes, but a God who confirms the truth that every act of human kindness is of cosmic, divine importance and truth. And as Maimonides writes, but sometimes truth flashes out to us so that we think that it is day. And I believe that's true for all of us. And when we meet next time, we'll read more of the guide to the perplexed and see how Maimonides explains that the imagery of the Torah is not to be read literally. I hope you'll join me. For now, please remember how much I love hearing from you, receiving your comments and your questions. Please email me or write me this week. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. Be well, my friends.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who can send a tax-deductible contribution of $36 or more to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media to help support our programming. Tax-deductible checks may be made out to GEM and mailed to GEM, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. Please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD, and we thank you for your kind support.